今晚嘅分享會咧，我哋邀請咗一位資深嘅宣明會嘅救援工作人員 Mike Weickert， 就同大家咧一齊進行實時嘅視像分享嘅。嗱 ，Mike 咧係加拿大人嚟嘅，佢從事咗救災嘅工作咧已經有超過20年啦，喺世界各地都參與過唔同規模嘅緊急救援嘅工作。咁啊喺烏克蘭危機爆發嘅初期咧，其實佢一直咧帶領我哋喺羅馬尼亞嘅救援嘅工作。親身接觸咗好多逃難出嚟嘅兒童啦，同埋家庭。阿 Mike 咧，而家佢身處喺羅馬尼亞嘅首都布加勒斯特Bucharest。咁咧就羅馬尼亞同香港咧就有5個鐘頭嘅時差嘅，而家係當地嘅3點鐘。Mike 咧就喺佢嘅辦公室加入我哋嘅 Zoom 嘅研討會。咁提提大家啦，其實 Zoom 咧有個功能嘅，有個叫轉錄文字嘅功能嘅。就可以將 Mike 一陣間嗰個嘅語音咧，就轉成為英文嘅字幕。咁大家可以用呢個功能啦。不過留意啦，因為字幕咧係由電腦 AI 產生嘅，咁可能有啲唔準確嘅地方，咁希望大家都見諒啦。咁我哋見到阿 Mike， Good afternoon. Yeah, you have to turn on your microphone. Yes, we hear you. Thank you very much for spending your time with us.
And, it's good to be with you, Chris.
Yes. We appreciate very much your work and your team's effort in responding the needs of the Ukrainians to cope with these devastating situations. And you have been giving them a lot of support. And we would very much like to hear from you tonight, giving us some first-person witness on the ground. And we have here about 80 audience joining this Zoom webinar tonight. And they're the people who love the children and families in Ukraine. And as well, many of them are World Vision supporters. Mike, could you please tell us first, where are the refugees are staying at? Do they have to live on the streets?
No, thankfully they do not, Chris. It's people cross the border, and they're now well supported to travel to the larger cities in Romania. And so people get transportation to places like Bucharest, where I am, or some of the other larger cities in the country. And they have some options when they get here. They are either directed to the shelter system. So there are places that maybe normally are university dormitories or domestic violence shelters or other places where there are beds and rooms, and they're given a place there if that's what they want. Many of them have connections to people here in Romania, and so they may be offered a place to stay in someone's apartment or house or that kind of thing. So thankfully, we just don't see any of that in terms of people sleeping on the streets. They are a lot of their basic needs are being met through the assistance World Vision and other agencies are giving them.
I see. So they are not. Some of them are staying with the people they know. Do any of them are staying with strangers?
That does apparently happen. There is a process so that those strangers are vetted, so that they don't. I think there was a lot of offers of help at the very beginning when people were crossing the border, exactly like you see in the picture here. Crossing over with their suitcases and not much else. And so there was a process to ensure that there was nobody taking advantage of them. So that those who are making those kind of offers are vetted, and people are referred only to ones that are credible. But this is something we're always on the lookout for as well, to make sure that no one tries to take advantage of them.
So the Romanians are really willing to offer help.
Yeah, they've been terrific. Actually, the Romanian society in general, the government, the civil society, the NGOs have been really good at opening up themselves to the Ukrainian refugees. And these are people who don't speak the same language as them. I mean, they have some shared connections, but it's not let's say as culturally close as say Ukraine and Poland. And the Romanians have done just a wonderful job of welcoming people in. And I've heard a lot of Ukrainians say exactly what you heard in the video. That woman said, "Boy, when we got here, we were really cared for." And that is what I hear from really all the refugees, is that they really feel like they've been looked after here. And I think it's been a pleasant surprise for them. They didn't know what to expect, and they've really been given a good welcome.
Okay, so when the refugees arrive here, what are the immediate needs when they arrive?
Well, we've done a number of assessments just to make sure we also understand what they're thinking, not just what we think. Not surprisingly, what they say first and foremost, they need a roof over their head. They need a place to stay. Sometimes that meant staying right near the border at first, and there were some camps, kind of transit camps that were set up. Very quickly, thankfully, we've been able to even help them bypass those and go right into the city. So they when they come here though, first they would say first, I need a place to stay. And most people don't come with a set plan, and so they may end up in the shelter system for a while. But after that, they're thinking about needing food, how they're going to feed themselves. And again, thankfully, there are some mechanisms either in the shelters themselves or in there's another center that we support that helps people can just drop in and get food that they need and hygiene items and clothing and things like that. And so, those kind of basic needs are what's first and foremost in their mind when they first get here. Sometimes people come with chronic diseases or healthcare issues that they picked up along the way as they become refugees, and so they're always looking for that kind of support as well. How do they attend to any of their health needs? That's usually the third priority, is to make sure that those are looked after.
Oh, some of them do need medical support.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a couple of things. This is probably the oldest refugee population in the world. This is Ukraine is an older population. We have a lot of older adults crossing, and so a lot of them would come with chronic diseases as well as anything that may have cropped up as they have had to move. So I met another woman, for example, just recently. She had a leg injury, got shot, and so she needed care here, and they were able to arrange that, which she was really thankful for as well. So there's definitely different types of health needs. I mean, it's not the top need, but obviously people who have chronic diseases like diabetes or things like that, they need their treatment, and sometimes they've had to leave all that behind. So those kind of things are important to attend to as well as their other basic needs.
Okay. You have shown me pictures looking like a stadium. What is this place? Are there people living inside, or what is this place for?
This is an interesting place. This is called ROM Expo. It's normally a big convention area. It has this main building and a bunch of side buildings. And it's normally used for, big events, for concerts, for things of that nature. And what the Romanians did, and then this was the municipality of Bucharest that took this on originally, and World Vision has supported it, but they opened this up as a place where people can go to get the food they need, the clothing they need, the hygiene items they need. There was also room for people in an emergency shelter situation. If there had been too many people to manage through the existing beds that they had, people could have stayed here. Thankfully, that never happened. The existing system worked pretty well, but the need for these basic items that people have are really critical. You can also see on the left some photos from our sort of a child-friendly space type area where kids could come and play and learn a little bit and just have some fun while their parents were going to get the food and other items that they need. So it was a nice bit of respite for them, just a bit of a break, something more normal for the kids to do. So this is a really important piece of work that World Vision supports, because it really reaches a lot of people. Thousands of people have come here to get the support they need, and this has been just a great way to particularly reach the people who are not in various centers that we know about, but they're just living in private residences. They can come here and get assistance, and then they can go back to their apartments, and they can come about every 10 days, I think, to this. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, so this is a place they can get some basic need and also a backup place. If there are too many people coming in, they can stay there.
Yeah, thankfully, no one has ever had to stay there, but that was the plan originally. But thankfully, as things got organized, they were able to manage the inflow. There's still almost 7,000 people coming in to Romania every day from Ukraine. So it's a lot of people, but they now have systems to manage that. And many people move on to other countries. And so it's not that it just fills up. There's always a constant movement of people here.
Okay. So we are in 3 months now. Do you notice any changes since the beginning?
Well, certainly as things got moved along, the government and the NGOs and other parts of society were able to organize themselves better and understand better the needs of the people. So at first we just tried to help them at the border, give them whatever they needed, food, water, things like that, and maybe referral to some where they could get help. Now, as I said, it's much more organized, and people are able to come in, at least get a bit settled, sort of get their bearings, understand the situation, and start thinking about tomorrow and not just about how am I going to survive. So this increased level of organization and this, let's say, a better understanding of the needs and preferences of the refugees has been really important. For example, even this ROM Expo here, where I'm showing you with the food they got, we started with certain types of food, and we learned over time, what Ukrainians like and what might be different than what Romanians like. And so, you could adapt some of the choices that people had there, so that they, were getting their basic needs met, but with a bit of understanding of the differences between people's preferences, which can often be really important.
Yeah, they could be different.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was really interesting, even for me as a Canadian, listening to the Romanians talk about how Ukrainian preferences were different than Romanian preferences. And, it's not like everybody has the same choice in food or what shampoos they like, or, sometimes it was even practical things. They didn't need a big bottle of shampoo because they were going to be only there for a few weeks and moving on. And so a smaller one would be better. And, some of these various nuances that you don't always get a chance to do in other crises, but this facility has been run very well so that we can meet basic needs, but also tailor it a bit so people's dignity and choice is respected.
Yeah, they feel dignified and being well served. Yeah, okay.
And that's really what we want, right? We really don't want to just be handing things out. We want to give them a dignified level of service and help them, just sort of have some normalcy while they're in this foreign country.
Yeah. I've seen another interesting picture. I'm going to show you. Is this container a makeshift internet cafe? Where this photo is taken?
More or less, it is. It's right in front of the building that we just showed at ROM Expo, and it is as it says there's free connectivity, so people can come in here. They can connect to the internet just for their own purposes, but also there's some laptops inside, and you can see some pictures of some kids playing in there, and this is sort of the first of about 10 we're going to do, at least in both in Romania and in Ukraine and Moldova. And the hope would be that these would also be excellent hubs for the kids to do digital learning. Most Ukrainian children are learning online using the Ukrainian system and curriculum. And thankfully, the Ukrainian government has been very well organized in that way and offering, the online curriculum and learning to the children. Not all of them are taking advantage of it, but this is a one platform for them to access that. As well as, we all like to sometimes be on the internet and browse our favorite subjects. We do make sure that certain sites are kept out so people can't just browse it, whatever, but that there's a degree of, blocking certain sites. But basically, the types of things that kids would really find useful, we make sure those are available as well. So yeah, it's an outdoor internet cafe that the refugees can take advantage of.
So that means some of the Ukrainian children here are accessing the online class in Romania back to the teachers in Ukraine.
Exactly. What we've understood from talking to the Ukrainian families is that most kids, I think something like 90%, really want to maintain their studies in Ukraine. Obviously, there's a familiarity with the teaching style and the language. They all think they're going to go back at some point. So of course they want to stay in the Ukrainian system as much as possible. Some children have chosen to enter the Romanian system. And so we also work with schools that are supporting that. That's more in person. Of course, probably most of these children have had a long 2 years of learning virtually during COVID as well. So I think some of them are really looking forward to the in-person type of learning. And so I think next year, as the school season starts again in September, there's going to be a bit of a blended approach, even for those learning in Ukrainian. They will have some opportunity to at least come to a class, even if their instruction is virtual from Ukraine and from Ukrainian teachers. It's going to be in person as well, so that they get the opportunity to be with their friends and peers.
Okay. So but we talk back about this internet cafe. Why it's so important to the refugees to get connected? Are they connecting people there in the Ukraine, maintaining a kind of a communications or connection?
Yep. Yeah, it definitely. Like most of us, they're highly digitally fluent people. They are used to communicating with each other, in that way, and that's continued as they've left Ukraine behind. So they're staying in touch with family members who are back. I think, again, many of us know that any of the men between 18 and 60 have to stay back in the country. Of course, some people not in those ages are still staying behind just because they didn't want to make the journey. So there's a lot of checking in on family members. There's also a lot of information provided online to the refugees. So there's several very good websites and the call centers that are designed to provide refugees with information on life in Romania, what services they can access, what they can do, what they can't do. And this, so this kind of connectivity is very important for them to just understand the realities. Not surprisingly, social media is important to them as well, and that's how they both share information that's useful about places like Rom Expo, but also, just where to find work, where to find other things that would be useful to them, where Ukrainians are living in the city, that kind of thing. So they very much rely on that kind of connectivity to function, particularly in a place where they don't speak the language. Even the alphabet, which is familiar to us, is not familiar to me anyway. It's not familiar to the Ukrainians for the most part. They use a different alphabet. So many things are foreign. It's nice for them to have access to the internet and to some of these services in Ukrainian.
Yeah, and adapting the lives in Romania.
Exactly.
Okay,
So
okay.
it's really an excellent tool, and we're hoping to not just expand it but there's other ways we're trying to help kids in particular access digital education through the classroom as well. But these are useful hubs, particularly in places like Rom Expo, where there's connectivity in the building but not outside. So this is another way to give people a bit more access.
I see. Thank you, Mike. Could you please tell us more about the refugee children here in Romania? And you've told me there's a special place called Happy Bubbles. Can you tell us more about it and how the Happy Bubbles are helping the children?
Sure. I mean, I think about a third of the refugees are children. I think that's a place to start. So there are a lot of children. Probably equally boys and girls. But there are a lot of children that travel with particularly their mothers and grandmothers as refugees. And so, when they are in apartments or when they are in these shelters, they can play together, but it's not a great setup in most cases. They're fairly crowded. They may not have places to play. I think if you remember on the video that you showed earlier, one of the children said, I think he brought like one stuffed toy and his mobile phone or something like that. They've left a lot behind. That's not even taking into account that they left behind friends. They left behind maybe activities like football or things like that they played. And all of a sudden they're in these new settings that they don't understand and don't have a lot to do. So we've looked to open, spaces for children to play and learn. So this center called a Happy Bubble, which is a sort of you might say a very enhanced child-friendly space. It's a place where kids can engage in some non-formal learning. It's not really structured curriculum, but there is programs for them to play and learn together. We've had children's entertainers come in there, and it's just a safe place for them to have some nice toys to play with, to engage and do some art and things like that. And this is a real wonderful opportunity for them. We also are going to be providing services for the mothers who come along as well. Sometimes it's about helping them navigate the social services here, or find things, or also maybe to learn some things themselves. The mothers also need some activities, some stimulation, because many of them are just kind of also in the fairly don't have a lot of options other than things like this. So I remember when one of these was opened, it was fascinating. I just, in some ways it seems very just like a normal daycare to many of us in a normal situation. But one of the mothers, I was watching her, she was kind of tearing up seeing this, seeing her kids play. And I have to assume, I didn't get the chance to talk to her, I have to assume that she just hasn't seen them play like normal kids that much. To have a facility like this, to have a place where they can just be themselves, was really meaningful to her. And I know we're getting a lot of Ukrainian mothers and teachers helping with these centers, because that, obviously having them will really make a difference. And I know a lot of them really want to do this because they see how important it is for children.
How long do they stay in this happy bubbles? A few hours a day, or?
Yeah, a few. We want to run a few different age groups, right? I mean, we you know, it's good to separate them out a little bit, and so we're just getting them started. We have a few up and running, and we are going to expand these. But basically, at this point, you know, there would be a few different age groups that would come in for a few hours at a time, and you know, work off some energy and have some fun and learn a few things. And I think it. Yeah, as I said, anytime I've spent there, they really have been happy places where kids are just being themselves, and you don't see really kids crying at these places. They're generally just having fun together, which is kind of fun. I engaged in a bit of a lawn tennis game with one of the children the other day. He brought out this, you know, tennis racket, and we started whacking the ball around, and it was great fun. So yeah, it was just kind of good to see how the kids just liven up when they see something like this.
Yes, when they're coming in and going out, they're getting a kind of a normalcy. So when, just like going back to schools and let the kids be kids, so they will get a lot of fun here in happy bubbles. Are we just having one bubbles or a lot of bubbles?
Well, we've got several planned. I mean, we have 2 up and running. And a third one is going to start very soon. We've been actually blessed to have, in a few cases, working with the Orthodox Church here in Romania, which is the biggest church. They've made some of their facilities available, and spaces available. So we've got one up and running, one to start soon there, and then another in another part of Bucharest. But the idea is, once these get going and we really understand how to do this effectively, we're going to build more in Bucharest, but then also in some of the other big cities where refugees are housed, because it's obviously a need that's well beyond Bucharest to get out and do this kind of thing. So we haven't got a target number yet, but I would expect 10 or more at least.
Oh, there's a lot of bubbles.
Could be a lot of bubbles, yes.
So, Mike, before we continue, maybe I can ask the audience to start writing the questions to you. Hold on，各位參加緊分享會嘅朋友，如果你有一啲問題咧想問 Mike 嘅話咧，咁大家可以利用 Zoom 嗰個嘅問答，即係 Q&A 嗰個功能嘅，就將你嘅問題寫低落嚟，寫英文或者中文都可以嘅。咁稍後我哋咧就會綜合一下，咁咧就問下 Mike 嘅。Mike, let's continue. Could you please share us some memorable stories that you have seen, you have witnessed on the ground, particularly get you touched about the children and families here?
Sure. I think certainly some of the most heart-wrenching stories that you hear are about people who have had to leave on very short notice to come to Romania, you know, and we've seen that in many situations, particularly at the very beginning of the crisis when the Russians really moved very quickly into parts of Ukraine. But even now still, you know, sometimes people have to make decisions to leave their homes on very short notice. I talked to one woman, she and her son had to leave Kyiv on 40 minutes notice. You know, when the conflict really started to get heavy very, very quickly, she was advised to leave. Her husband couldn't travel, not because he had to stay in for military duty, but he actually had a chronic disease that he had to stay in. He couldn't travel. It would have been too hard to travel. So she literally had to say goodbye to him, get in a bus with a bunch of strangers. She came to the Romanian border, you know, crossed, had no plans beyond getting to Romania, crossed in, came down to Bucharest. It was actually immediately, she's a very interesting woman. She really started helping other refugees right away. She really kept thinking of herself, I'm in pretty good health. Yes, I have my son, but I can cope with all this. So she started helping, you know, even before she got to her own shelter. I think she was helping a more elderly refugee, you know, get on a train and go somewhere else. Once she got to a shelter, she was, as a relatively fluent English speaker, she was helping the Romanian staff communicate with the Ukrainians who couldn't speak Romanian or English. So she was the translator in her shelter, and that was hugely important, so that the shelter itself could gives the right services to people, you know, because the communication between Romanians and Ukrainians is very difficult unless they have a common language, and English is often it. So anyway, I was just really impressed with this woman. Her sense of service was incredible. You know, she wasn't I mean, she obviously went through some trauma. She had left her husband behind. She had left, on a very short notice, left everything behind. I'm not sure if she's back yet in Kyiv. I haven't talked to her in a little while. People are returning, so she may have chosen to return if it's gotten safer. But just when we did talk, it was just so impressive to talk to someone who would be so selfless at a time when she was facing a lot of her own struggles. So that was one story. I remember talking to another family that they also left very quickly, and then they again had to leave male members of their family behind, and they were trying to make onward plans, maybe, I think, to go to the United States or something, but they that was still a bit uncertain, and they showed me video of their home that had been completely destroyed. It hadn't been destroyed when they left, but then it was completely damaged by the war after they left. And I mean, I was just sort of thinking to myself, I couldn't imagine, you left it behind, it was still intact, and then all of a sudden, you get a video of this of your life, like in ruins in some ways. I think they hadn't lost any family members because of it, but they definitely had lost their home. And obviously, I'm sure insurance is not going to easily repair something like that, so it may be gone for good for them. So, again, just sort of thinking about what kind of suffering people face. It's really, it is really heart-wrenching. I mean, you're encouraged by what you see from people, but it's also have to be really clear. They've gone through a lot. There's been a lot of psychological suffering as well that they carry, and many refugees have told me that. They said, we're not mentally healthy the way we should be because we've been through so much.
Okay, yeah, it's really touching stories, and Mike, let's start taking some questions from the audience. This is a very good question. So we talk a lot about children. How about the mothers or the adults? Do we have any work we have support them psychologically or psychosocially? Or do we have any support to them?
It's a great question. So we are. One of the best things for when people are psychosocially, kind of their health isn't so good. I mean, one of the best things you can do is meet their basic needs. So,
yes.
Just by providing food, helping them find shelter, that takes some of the pressure off. And for many people that helps. But obviously, there's usually a certain amount of direct care that people need as well. That is something that we're doing to some degree in the happy bubbles for the mothers as well as for the children. But that's something we actually are going to do more of in the future. We are not yet where we want to be, frankly, in terms of addressing mental health and psychosocial support. It's something that we've been developing plans. We're looking at for example, an online platform so they can access psychological support in Ukrainian from Ukrainian psychologists, but that would be virtually in most cases because it's hard for those folks to, kind of get the mental health support they need when we don't speak the language very well. And it's not so easy to find a mental health, like a psychologist or psychotherapist here. So it's taking a little bit of time. We're trying to take the basic pressures off them, but at the same time, some of those more specific mental health interventions will require more work. So that's something that in the next 3 months, we hope to do a lot more of.
Okay, so they're getting help also from Ukraine by
to some degree, yes.
Connectivity, yeah.
Okay. It's been recognized as a big issue, and so there are some organizations have started doing some work on this, and World Vision is prioritizing this in the next 3 months as something we're going to do a lot more of. So I'm hopeful that we'll be contributing to those efforts in a more significant way going forward.
Okay, Mike, this is another question that you may tell us something about people in Ukraine. Do World Vision have any staffs working in Ukraine, and how do we make sure that we can keep them safe?
Right. So Ukraine is a new country for World Vision. There has been a conflict in the east for about 7-8 years, but we chose not to respond there because we thought it wasn't as significant as some other places. But with this full conflict, we've chosen to work inside Ukraine, and we've now reached a lot of people. We have a small team in Ukraine in a few of the places. One just across the border from Romania, in a city called Chernivtsi, and then the rest of our team is up in Lviv, which is the bigger city in the west of Ukraine. And we work with partners throughout Ukraine. So we work with churches, we work with governments, with non-governmental organizations, and we've been working with those who can reach the hardest areas the fastest. So some of these agencies have worked in Ukraine for a long time. Of course, the churches are throughout Ukraine. And so they provide that real network of support. And it's been so impressive to see how the Ukrainians have stepped up to, help each other. And real courageous work, driving supplies into some of the dangerous parts of the country and working hard to find the people who are kind of a bit invisible, because, some people are in Ukraine are not affected too much by the conflict, and others who have had to leave the conflict areas are they're like refugees, but they're refugees in their own country. And so they need support, and sometimes they're kind of invisible to people as well. But the churches and other groups are really taking the time to find those people and make sure they get support as well. So this has been our approach in Ukraine, is to work with these groups and really make sure we reach the most vulnerable right away. Just to say, we have some pretty good safety protocols as well. The team in Ukraine does spend a lot of time in bomb shelters, not because any bombs have ever fallen near them, but there's missile, air raid alerts that happen every day. And so it's hard on the team. They often have to go down into the bomb shelter in the middle of the night. But thankfully, from a health perspective, everyone has been safe. And they've been well looked after. So we do continue to make sure our team is safe, but also that we are pushing assistance to the hardest places that we can with our partners.
So, Mike, would you consider yourself or the people in Romania safe, or is the work dangerous?
The work itself here, no. In Bucharest, thankfully, is quite safe. Romania is actually a fairly safe city. The driving is a little unsafe at times, but we have good drivers who take care of it. There's some risk of minor theft and things like that, but really, it's a generally very safe place, which is good for our team. We can get on with our job. It's good for the refugees too, right? I mean, as much as there are always concerns of people taking advantage of the refugees, the limit, because there isn't a lot of crime, they're relatively safe, and there's been a lot of good information to them that tell them how to protect themselves, to avoid human traffickers or other people who might try to take advantage of them. So, we're in Romania, we're mostly concerned about the refugee safety, and as I said, there are some good measures in place, some good systems in place, but it's something we have to continually be vigilant about because it's crucial.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And another very good question. Among the refugees, most of them, or how many of them are planning to go back to Ukraine? And how long do they expect they will be staying in Romania? And if they're not planning to going back, do they have any long-term plan here, stay in Romania?
So, yeah, this is a really a hard question to answer. I would think most Ukrainians expect to go back. That if they're displaced within Ukraine itself, or whether if they've entered another country, most of them are thinking, I'm going to go back. Now, I think as the crisis has gone on longer, maybe that's changing a bit, and more people are recognizing they need to either go to another country or to stay in the country they're in, for example, Romania, for a longer period of time while the war exists. I don't have a good sense of what the proportion is, but I think most people would prefer to be in their own country if they can. There are some who, said, Ukraine's had so much trouble, I'm going to go somewhere else. And many of them have connections, visa opportunities to other countries, and will probably just leave, and be immigrants, be refugees in other countries like Canada or the United States or Germany, places like that. So it is a mixed bag. And I'm sure even for the people, at one point, they may think they want to go back. And then as time goes on, they may think, I just want to go to another country. And then they may think, I want to go back again. It's a really dynamic situation in that way, which is understandable. It's a very uncertain situation right now.
Okay, thank you. We have another questions about the medical support here in Romania for the Ukrainians. Do they have any? Do the Ukrainians have any need for medical treatment in general? And particularly, there is an outbreak of monkeypox in several places in Europe, and COVID-19 is still feeling here in Europe, right? Are there any special medical need or in general medical need they are asking for?
I think, as I mentioned before, there are people who have chronic diseases or may have had just a specific disease related to or injury related to the conflict that needed treatment, and they have got that treatment for the most part. The Romanian system is probably not the strongest healthcare system in the world, but I think it sounds like it's been good enough to get people the care they need for those kind of diseases for the most part. Obviously, there's a language barrier that you have to cross a little bit in terms of getting healthcare here, but there are, again, Romanians who are giving of their time and effort to help people navigate the healthcare system. I think definitely COVID-19 was an issue. I got COVID-19 while I was here for the first time after running away from it for 2 years, and you know, I was entirely possible that I got it from the Romanian influx of people here, but I'm not sure. So definitely COVID-19 impacted people. What I didn't hear, I think a lot of it was that new BA2 variant, I think, because there was a lot of sickness, but not necessarily a lot of reported deaths or anything like that. So I think that's the case. Monkeypox obviously is a harder to transmit disease than COVID-19, thankfully. So we're not hearing about it as an issue. You know, it's a harder one to transmit generally, and let's hope that it remains that way. I was actually trying to get myself up to speed on monkeypox today because I was, you know, all of a sudden there's a lot of talk about it and trying to understand what are the risks. It's a disease that's been in the human population since the 1970s, apparently. So it's not, thankfully, it's not just a brand new disease, but it's obviously, you know, coming on the heels of COVID, we worry about it more, and I think we're right to do so. But it thankfully is one that you know, hopefully will not be the same kind of health risk that COVID has been to everybody.
Okay, another good question. Mike, are we or World Vision or other organizations doing something special to protect the girls and women staying in here in Romania and protecting them from sexual exploitation?
So, I mean, World Vision would be part of the overall effort that's actually in this case led by the government, and I think even the government of Ukraine. For starters, it's, you know, it's usually about creating awareness, making sure people understand that there are some risks. You know, that there will be people who may seek to take advantage of you in this situation. So there's generally good provision of information to people as they cross the border, and just to tell them what you need to do, what you don't have to do, you know, and if people do certain things, you should, you know, sort of avoid it or say no. So there's that piece. Obviously, the shelters themselves, I've talked to refugees in shelters, and they say they feel safe. So, you know, I think that I take that as the shelters are being run well and people are being generally looked after well, and also, again, understand their rights and some of the risks that are out there. I think it's obviously harder for the people who are in apartments. Now, the people they stay with may give them very good advice and in some ways a degree of protection, you know, and social protection. But obviously, for some people, it could be a risk. We aren't hearing a lot of about stories of exploitation and abuse, but we expect that will happen. You know, there's always going to be cases. The longer people stay, the resources start to run out. You know, that kind of thing. They may become, let's say, more streetwise, but they may also have more risks just because they run out of resources. So there's definitely, those risks are definitely there. World Vision is contributing as much as we can to protecting people, both by supporting shelters and supporting people in getting their basic needs. Because if their basic needs are met, then they're less likely to put themselves in risky situations. And so hopefully that will be something that continues. This is a risk in every crisis, and we try to pay attention to it and help people be as informed as they can and as equipped as they can.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. And looking ahead, what would be your greatest concerns for the Ukrainians here?
I think, you know, there's now the longer that they stay here with those particularly who don't have a plan to go anywhere else or an option to go anywhere else, some of them are going back to Ukraine, and maybe that's the best. In many cases, they can now safely return to their home areas, but some are kind of stuck here because their homes have been destroyed or their cities are occupied or things like that. And, you know, I have heard, talking to Ukrainians, there is some concern that, you know, people are a bit bored, they're getting more depressed, so that, again, that kind of mental health piece could play a risk. You know, for people could start to make bad decisions, bad choices. that's not quite like starving to death, thank goodness, but it is definitely something we're trying to avoid. So I do worry about the mental health and just some of the potential for people to start making not as very poor choices as they in their lives. Thankfully, from the point of view of meeting their basic needs, it seems like that will continue, that the government and the NGOs continue to make their services available. Thankfully, we continue to receive generous support for our work, and I think others are as well. And so that means that we can afford to buy the food and other things that they need. So it's some of these let's say longer term needs that are the most significant. One thing I'm both let's say looking forward to doing something more on, but also concerned about is many people want to work and they want to get a job just to earn some money, to have a bit of dignity, to have just a bit of a more to do in their lives, and that's proving not too hard in certain ways. In terms of legally you can do it, but it's challenging logistically. Mothers have to arrange childcare. Language is an issue. The wages aren't always that high. So there are those kind of barriers to kind of having a more normal life here in Romania that we're trying to help the refugees overcome as well.
Okay. Because of time, we may not be able to answer every questions from the audience. But I have one. What's the World Vision plan in the coming few months in anticipating the needs of the Ukraine here in Romania?
Okay, so here it is about a lot of things I just talked about. Just continuing to meet the basic needs, continuing to help people protect themselves and to make sure that they are protected, and things like their mental health challenges are addressed in a better way. And then I think the livelihoods issue that I just talked about, getting jobs and stuff, that's something we're trying to figure out how we can do more. But one of the big areas of focus for us is helping the kids over the summer, so they have activities over the summer, like summer camps or other things that will keep them stimulated and developing and happy. And then helping them to, as I said, to get into the school system next year, whether it's into the Romanian system or into the Ukrainian system. That's a huge thing. We just, as much as many people are moving, there's going to be lots of refugee children who will be here and who will need schooling. And if we can contribute to that, that will make a big difference, I think, in their lives. Until they go back, we can't lose these years. We need to help them continue to move ahead. And again, the possibility for doing it here is very good. So I think we just need to keep focusing on that. So those are some of our key priorities for the next while. So we're obviously doing a lot in Ukraine as well. Ukraine is probably going to be at least half, like over 50% of our programming will actually be in Ukraine as we continue to grow there. We also do some work in Moldova, but Romania is kind of sort of the second area of focus, with Ukraine being the most important. But everything we can do here to make a difference, we will.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And Mike, I think of that there are actually many places around the world that are crises like Ukraine. How is this situation similar to that? What has happened in Syria, in Afghanistan, or even in Somalia? Especially, you have previous experience working for the Syrian refugees there. Is it similar to the need there?
Many things are similar. For one, it's a large movement of people. We've had, I think, almost 7 million people leave the country, and about 7 or 8 million actually displaced within Ukraine. So a lot of people have left their homes. That's very much like Syria. In fact, it's a bigger number than Syria. So it's a huge amount of people have been on the move. Like a lot of refugee situations, this mental health trauma that they face it can be quite significant. So those are similar. The fact that most people go to urban areas is also very, very normal. Most refugees don't want to live in a camp unless they have to. Most of them would prefer to live in cities, just live a closer to normal life if they can. And I guess I think what's normal, the children want to play, they want to learn, they want to just be with their friends and have fun. That very much transcends every crisis I've seen. And so I think that's something that again, we try to help make happen, because we know it's not just a nice thing to have. It really does make a huge difference in their ability to cope with the challenges they face and to how, to continue to develop as humans, have that opportunity to have some normalcy in play and learning and growth is hugely important.
Okay, Mike, thank you for sharing with us. We've been taking you too much time tonight. And we know every minute is crucial to you and your team. And from our audience, we would like to pass our blessings from Hong Kong to you and the Ukraine people, to the Ukrainian. And of course, we will pray for you. We will pray for your safety, your physical health, and your mental strength in coping with this situation. And not just for you, but for your colleagues, for our partners, and for all the Ukrainians here. And we thank again for your sharing tonight, and have a good day.
Thank you, Chris. It's been great being with you and with everybody in the audience. I really appreciate your prayers and your support. I mean, it makes a huge difference to us.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We have to say goodbye. Bye. 好，各位參加分享會嘅朋友，我哋剛才好多謝阿 Mike 同我哋分享啦，讓我哋了解更多烏克蘭兒童同埋家庭嘅狀況。咁今晚我哋亦都好多謝好多嘅有心人啦，透過捐助宣明會俾我哋去支持喺烏克蘭嘅救援工作。正如阿 Mike 所講，除咗喺烏克蘭啦，其實咧世界上面有好多嘅地方同樣咧係面對住戰爭衝突啦，同埋一啲緊急嘅災難而所帶嚟嘅危機。可以話係令到當地嘅兒童陷入咗一個好無助，或者係一個好脆弱嘅環境。咁今晚我哋都多謝一班嘅宣明會嘅捐助者啦，佢哋透過宣明之友呢個嘅捐助嘅計劃，每個月咧用一個定額捐款嘅方式，俾宣明會有機會喺呢啲脆弱嘅環境裏邊咧做救援嘅工作。唔單止為佢哋去解決佢哋嘅燃眉之急，更加幫助佢哋重建生活。同埋咧特別為一啲身心受創嘅小朋友咧帶嚟希望。今日完結我哋嘅分享會嘅時候咧，好想咧同大家分享一段1分鐘嘅短片，俾大家更多了解宣明之友呢個計劃。
In an instant, the lives of children living in Ukraine turned upside down. Today, Ukraine is one of the most dangerous places on earth. War and conflict changed the lives of so many around the world in an instant. You can help children living in the world's most dangerous places. For only a small amount a month, you can help provide life-saving essentials and trauma support for a child affected by crisis and conflict. Your gift will help the world's most vulnerable who are pushed into crippling poverty by conflict, such as the crisis in Ukraine. Donate today and protect the most vulnerable children in dangerous places so they can survive, recover, and build a future.